Okay, we're now live, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody to this Cabinet Markets Working Party today. First of all, can we have apologies and any substitutes, please?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Robinson and Councillor MK Swift. We haven't received any substitutes.
Okay, but we are quorum, so we can proceed.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so next, I think that's members' interests. This is just to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or other interests they might have in relation to the items included on the agenda. Councillor Blackburn?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm part of the Town Deal Board in Brighouse, and I'm a director of the Brighouse bid, just in case those have any bearing on any items, but have no financial interest.
Lovely, thank you. Welcome, Councillor Thompson. Do you have any interest to declare? I don't think you would hear me.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, as obviously if things crop up, people can declare later on in the meeting. So next is that this meeting is open to the public, except that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, it is recommended that the public be excluded for item number 8, paragraph 3, on the grounds that it involves the likely discussion of exempt information as defined in the stated paragraph of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that's paragraph 3 is financial and business affairs. And we have that item on the last on the agenda, don't we? So we can switch the cameras off at the end. Okay. Right, so on to the minutes. We've got two lots of minutes. So firstly, the minutes from the 17th of February. And I think it's proposed that because we don't have two members from that meeting, if I propose, and I think Councillor Bradbury, you're happy to second those.
I'm happy to second, Chair, yes.
Thank you. So we can take those minutes as ready to be signed by me. Thank you. And then we have the minutes for the 19th of July 2022. Can we agree these as a correct record?
I'll move those, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Excellent. Right. So on to item 5, which I think will be Paul Greenwood, the revenue monitoring update.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say a few words, if I may. The report presented to the working group today details the latest revenue forecast for the current year for the service control budget against a service control forecast against the approved budget. There are budgets not contained in the report that are responsibility of CAFM around the premises. The latest projection details the forecast budget pressure of 143,000 in the current year, which represents a reduction on the forecast previously reported to the working group. In terms of the overall budget, the appendix in the report details the various projections that provide for the 143 budget pressure. There are a number of budgets in there. The most significant, as you can see, are employees and income budgets. There are premises budgets that are the responsibility of CAFM around refuse collection, but the budgets in relation to energy and rent and rates are the responsibility of CAFM. The supplies and services budgets are largely around security, but there are a few other budgets in there. But as it said in the report, the most predominant budgets are the employee budgets and the income budget. Although there's a budget pressure forecast in the report, it's worth pointing out again to the working group that in actual terms, that the service is forecast to achieve a net surplus of 325k. As you can see in the report, the income is again forecast to exceed service controlled expenditure by 325,000. The report details the actions in the report that have been carried out over the last 2 years to achieve savings within the overall service control budget. I think they were approved by Cabinet back in November 20. All of the actions have now been implemented. There will be some savings around some of the actions that may be achieved in the next financial year. That may increase the level of savings, but the actions detailed in the report are primarily responsible for the reason why the overall budget pressures is reduced from 320,000 in 1920 to the 143,000 that's detailed in the report. And I think if we think of all the challenges and all the factors that have impacted on the market service over the years, I think that represents quite an achievement. Just some of the factors that we're aware of: the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic. The economy is obviously another factor that's coming into play now. The trading activity for markets general, and I know John will can say more than me how markets across England and Wales have been impacted by a variety of factors. Other factors that may impact on the budget over the years, obviously inflation is one. We're all aware of energy inflation and how that may impact on the budget. Well, that's something that the CAFM service are responsible for, and a lot of work going on around there to see how we can reduce the energy cost. And also the investment that's detailed in the report. We all welcome the investment through the future high street, significant investment in the market service, which is absolutely fantastic. But, you know, there will be some disruption along the way, and how we manage that as a service, I just say, is just another one of those challenges that the service has to manage. So overall, I think in summary, there is still a budget pressure within the service. I think that, you know, to look at it, the market service has come a long way from 1920 to the current, and I think there's a lot of hard work, Chair, gone into the fact that costs have reduced against the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And yes, thanks to everybody who has put the work in to try to bring those savings in since the Future Council paper. So I have something I'd like to say at the end, but first of all, Councillor Blackborough.
Thank you, Chair. I think something to just add on to a future work programme is the how we deal with the disruption of the Brighouse markets once work commences. You know, big congratulations, Paul, on the figures. You know, it has a really big impact. But I think we need to look at how we manage the stallholders, so we don't lose the stallholders when we get the new Brighouse market eventually when it is built. So perhaps for a future work programme that'd be useful.
Thank you. Then Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, thank you very much to Paul and the team putting this together. Just on what Howard said, actually, I agree that it's probably because it's something mentioned in the document around Todmorden and the roadworks. I wonder if kind of a wider discussion around roadworks and works and how we kind of manage that, because I know there's been, just specifically Halifax, there's been a lot of communication with the traders. It might just be worth an item on the kind of wider issues around that and how we deal with that. I just wanted to ask about particularly around the shortfall in Halifax Borough Market and around occupancy, because obviously its occupancy is around 80% and this causes the shortfall in the income. I was just wondering, historically, how does that 80% compare to where it's been kind of historically? Obviously COVID will have an impact, but kind of pre-COVID, are we seeing a recovery in terms of occupancy? And if it's a case of that realistically the borough market in Halifax, with the size of it, is not likely to reach full occupancy, you know, going forward, should we always kind of assume full occupancy when doing the numbers, or is it worth looking at that? If that makes sense.
Can I come on that, Chair, if I may? It does make perfect sense. Obviously, in the report, we mentioned the occupancy at the various indoor and open markets. The borough market income levels that are required and the Todmorden indoor market obviously represent a significant amount of the overall. Although I think it's fair to say that occupancy has remained broadly consistent over the period of the review. We did look at the income streams, and income, allowing for inflation, is broadly being consistent. Obviously, it still represents a major challenge for the market in that, in order to achieve the budget figures, we need sort of 90% occupancy. And I think, regardless of the financial position, the economy, or whatever, if your income budget allows for such a high level of occupancy, it's always going to be a challenge. So I think that's regardless of the current trade and everything else. But to answer your question, occupancy has broadly remained fairly consistent over the years. Obviously, there are challenges around that. when traders leave and new traders come in, there's the incentive scheme that means that income levels don't rise to the previous level for a 12-month period. But broadly speaking, occupancies remained round about that 80% and around the other levels for some of the other markets as well.
Thank you, Paul. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Probably 3 points really, picking up from the comments that have been made, that all kind of link together. So there's something about sequencing here. So the point that Councillor Blackburn made about the kind of the change and the impact of the change and the transition period, if you like, if we call it that, is going to impact upon a number of markets across the borough. There are quite a number of markets. While and again, I would certainly welcome there's a significant level of investment going into those markets. But as you quite rightly recognise, that will cause disruption in the short to medium term, and that will have an impact over the short to medium term, hopefully with longer term benefits. So perhaps there's an item for us to come back to, which isn't just about Brighouse and the impact in Brighouse. There are a number of markets where there'll be similar issues, and whether we call that change management and managing the change, there's something about how we approach that and how we support our market traders during that period, which will just be a further complication in what's already been a very difficult period over the last 2 or 3 years. So I think that is an item that we could come back to more holistically. The second part to that is there is a bit of a theme emerging, and I think this probably all links together, maybe in a kind of a major item really. There's a bit of a theme emerging around some of the future planning for our markets, and looking at almost a complementary or a slightly extended offer where we're looking at creating event space, which moves us away from what we typically class as a market that's trading wares. So in the borough market and in Brighouse market, the designs for the future talk about event space. And I do think that there are 2 parts to that. The first thing is that will need something very different to the service that we provide, and whether it is a service that the market service provides or whether it's something that someone else steps into that space. Again, it just starts to throw up some things that we need to consider and plan for. There's very little point in creating event space if we haven't got somebody who's going to manage and let that space and generate the activity and the footfall, etc., etc. So again, there's probably a bit of a broader strategic conversation around what that might mean, what that might look like, and how we make best use of that, if that's the vision for the future. And the other thing that comes with that, certainly in the borough market, in order to create that space, one of the consequences being that it means that we do lose lettable space. So while Paul's right, occupancy, forgive me if I've come across as patronising, occupancy is basically a calculation of those traders that we have in situ against the number of stalls that we have to let. Now, you can increase your occupancy in one of 2 ways. You increase the number of traders that you've got, or you reduce the number of stalls that you let. So actually your occupancy levels can stay the same, but your income can reduce if you have fewer stalls to let. And some of the changes that are being proposed at the moment will have some impact in terms of potential income in the future. So again, it just feels like there's a broader conversation to consider a number of these issues. Partly the transition from where we are now to where we intend to be. And then secondly, about, well, what does that look like? And what does that mean now? And how do we prepare and plan for that and make sure that we make the best use of the investment that's going into our markets? So, Chair, with your permission, I think there's probably quite a broad conversation to be had, and perhaps we can gear up for that at the next meeting.
Thank you, Alan. I mean, we'll get to the work programme later on, but I would have thought there's probably time to have something around that on the next meeting. And yes, it is absolutely crucial for Todmorden, I know, because there's already been disruption, but we anticipate more disruption when it comes to our town's fund changes. And I think that brings me back to the budget pressure, which I think we've discussed this briefly in a previous meeting, and my feeling was the difficulty was that the budget as it's set at the moment isn't fit for purpose because it doesn't match what's happening. But it's very difficult at the moment, I think, to set a new target or whatever you want to call it, because we don't really know the markets are going to be like when we come out of the end of all of this, the work that's being done. So I'd be, whilst it's unsatisfactory having targets that are constantly missed, I don't think now is the time perhaps to try to get those aligned, and we have to be a bit more patient about that, even though generally speaking I'd be in favour of trying to match budgets to reality as quickly as possible. Okay, yes, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, apologies for being late, and I thought it was a real meeting, so I was on the bus when I realised it was a virtual meeting. But so if you've covered this again, just about Sobby Bridge, I mean, the market is sort of gone. The event space is going to be there. I just really want, I mean, I know it's difficult and I know money's tight, but I just really want to know that we are committed to providing some money for events, or that we are going to have some sort of market there, because you know we are a market town allegedly, and it just seems a shame that it just feels like, yeah, you've got rid of the market, so you can forget about it altogether, and then we'll, you know, that interim period before we find some sort of organisation that might be willing to on the space, it might just, you know, die a death.
Does anyone want to come back on that point before I bring Councillor Thompson in again?
Chair, may I respond?
Yeah, John, thank you.
So you mean the service has always had an intention to look at market activity within Sorby Bridge upon completion of the area, and not only just completion of the particular event area that will take place on the market's former location, but also in conjunction with working with Fire and Water. And at the moment, Fire and Water's headquarters, if for want of a better terminology, are not ready or fit for purpose. So there is still a lot of work to be done. There is still a lot of exploration and discussions to be undertaken. But there is an intention that we will uphold the council minute by taking markets back to Sorby Bridge at no cost to the council.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, can I just add, at no cost to the council?
That is what
a break even, or what?
Yeah, the cabinet minute says that we must break even on all market activity.
So that seems a bit unfair when other markets are working at a loss.
There's not many markets working at a loss now, Councillor Smith, if you look at the budget position.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, John. Councillor Smith. Councillor Thompson again, please.
Yeah, I'm going to briefly ask a slightly naughty question, and I'm sure it's been asked before, but I will just because it's mentioned in the document, and it's something that residents raised to me, just around the car boot sales in Halifax and Brighouse and what our current kind of intention is with that. And then I was also going to ask about the kind of, obviously we know the energy bills are going to be a massive issue going forward across the council, and I was wondering about specifically in regards to market. It might vary from market to market, but in terms of how the energy bills are actually paid. I know in Borough Market a lot of it's direct payment by the traders. Is that the case across? And then also perhaps just a bit about what we are trying to do to mitigate that, because I know that is one of the big concerns.
Okay, I can answer the first part of that. So if someone else can come in on the energy in a moment, because I think we had a question at Cabinet about or a council about the car boot sales. These were ceased, for those who don't know, these were stopped in 2020 as a part initially because of COVID, but then a decision was made that because they were running at a loss, we would not restart them. We are very open to any operator who wants to come along and talk to the council about running them with under license from the council, but I don't think we've had any interest from anybody in doing that. But we would certainly talk to anybody who came along to do that, because we know that some people found them very valuable, but we just felt it wasn't something that we as a council could effectively subsidise any longer. Okay, council. Sorry, are you wanting to come in on that Yes, and then we'll move on to the second part.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair, for that. Just in relation to the car boot, because I know in Brighouse particularly that actually the long-term plans are potentially the site where it would be held would no longer be available as well. And equally, the other concern that is raised by the police often is that they are a very quick way of getting rid of goods that have not been purchased in the correct way, shall we say.
I think, yes, I think that certainly was one of the problems that led to increased costs for running them. Okay, so John, I think if you can come in on the energy bills, thank you.
Well, I was just going to top off your car boot sale discussion, really. So Brighouse, so obviously we utilise now the open market to accommodate the sale of pre-loved items on a Sunday, which is growing and taking shape. And the approach in Halifax, whilst there has been no forthcoming private operator, the encouragement has been for charitable organisations such as Oscar at Ovendin and Smart Move and the Boxing Club at Old Lane to undertake charitable car boot sales under licence from the council. And they've proven quite successful for both organisations. And I think that is where the future of car boot sales lie, Councillor Thompson, really, is that we utilise the car boot sales to help grow our charitable organisations. And then going back to electricity, energy is a major concern for the service at the moment, and particularly in some of the discussions I've had with some of our retailers. So we are currently looking at exploring, but we have made no further moves on this, so there are no guarantees. But we are looking at how we can engage with the traders. Potentially, how can we either acquire it cheaper, or whether they can acquire it cheaper. Now, many are on fixed terms, but there's a lot now falling out of those fixed terms. And it's how because obviously we've got rising costs ourselves, particularly the open market provision, and therefore we may have to reflect that at a later date when we look to review charges. So it is a concern, is energy, because the prices are escalating for everyone, really.
Okay, thank you. So unless any officers have anything to add on, Alan?
Sorry, well, it probably would be quite significant, but one of the pieces of work that we're doing at the moment, you will have heard through different fora, we do talk about our approach to decarbonising the estate. There's a massive commitment and some significant schemes and projects, that some of which have delivered and some are in delivery. We're currently exploring our next, if you like, pipeline of opportunities, and one of the big ones that we're looking to try and look at reducing our carbon footprint and therefore costs is Halifax Brewery Market. Now that will be a little way off. At this stage, we're looking at securing funding to do some sort of feasibility work to explore what might be possible, what possible solutions there might be, so that when any bidding opportunities arise, and they are quite kind of regular these days, they we're well placed to be able to secure additional funding to look at how we can reduce the energy costs and energy usage and the carbon emissions in the market hall. Now, I say it's only one of our markets, but nevertheless, it's a big emitter, and it'll be a little bit further down the line. But again, any reductions in cost will be passed on, of course, to the tenants through the service charge.
Thank you, John. And of course, Todmorden already got the heat pump from a previous round of bids, which is very pleasing. Okay, so I think unless there's any more questions on that paper, we can move on to item 6, which is comms. And is that Karen and Natasha?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, it's my name's Natasha White, and this is my colleague Karen Lewis, and we are in the comms team. I'd like to just talk you through some of the highlights from Karen's update report, if that's okay. So recent activity includes press releases. So the first major one would be the Markets Works, talking specifically about the Future High Street Fund. We had some good coverage in the Brighouse Echo, talking about the submitted plans for the Brighouse deal. And another press release went out about the investment plans for Halifax Town Centre. We continue to promote all the markets through the main corporate social media channels, and popular content still remains to be the trader films that we did earlier in the year. We're working on a new one, but also the food gathering event, popular engagement on that, which also appeared on the Visit Calderdale social channels, as well as the next chapter, where we have been looking at the regeneration work and linking through to the next chapter website there on associated comms channels. You may have seen, if you've popped into the market recently, the bear with us while we upgrade your market in the borough market, and there's 40 boards available. I don't know if all 40 have gone up, but certainly there's a lot of the boards dotted around the place there. It's in our Think You Know Halifax style, and I know my colleague Thomas have been working with the market very closely on getting those signs out. I think that there's going to be 8 large vinyl banners as well, due to be going up very shortly. And I think Thomas wanted me to sort of convey that, we've got a commitment there that if any additional signage is needed from any of the traders, or any usual routes affected through the markets, we're happy to look at additional signage as and when required, really. I'd like to now just talk about some future activity, if that's okay. So since I've been in post, I've sort of recognised that there's a lot of overlap in terms of our comms messages between some of the different services. So you've got central comms, you've got Visit Calderdale, place development, regeneration and next chapter, and also business and skills. And there's huge opportunity, I feel, for some cross-promotional opportunities between the services. So I've brought together the comms officers for a regular meeting to create a more holistic comms plan going forward. And in our last meeting, we discussed the possibility of perhaps all coming together, joining forces for a Christmas campaign for the Halifax Borough Market. Bit of a sort of play on words, I suppose, but Christmas under one roof. So we'd love to be able to work with the traders on hints and tips for Christmas and promotions and competitions. So that's something that we're working on as a team. And also, I think I mentioned this last time, but we are continuing to work with our colleagues in the web team on our new look web page, landing page for the market. So so we've got a central place where we can our comms will go to, that's engaging for residents and businesses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you particularly for the work you do in cross directorates, because I know that's always more difficult to do, but often is really worth doing and bring more than the sum of its parts in a way for doing that. So thank you very much for that. So I've got Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just expand on the trader campaign, and especially the case study based in Brighouse? What does that entail and what is it? So it's a bit vague.
Sure. And we've got a really lovely success story with Olivia, and unfortunately she's so she's so busy that we're struggling to nail her down. So we were booked in to do a case study film with her, but she cancelled, and she's really busy. So it's just a case of pinning her down, I'm afraid, in terms of timescales when she's available. But yeah, it's another story to highlight, really, the success you can have starting out a business as a trader and what that can lead to. You know, it's a story that John, I know, particularly wants to tell.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, thank you very much. The kind of cross-directory stuff I know is something that's, it's something that's been raised as an issue before, so it's really good to hear that that's happening, because I think what often happens is, and it's kind of a point of confusion for me as a councillor as well, trying to work out where everything's coming from when Visit Calderdale's posting one thing and you've got this Culturedale thing and then you've got this thing on the markets and this place development. It's like, where do you even begin with it? I was just going to ask about specifically around kind of, you know, just the social media and kind of the, you know, the kind of the organic reach with that, because obviously I think a really big asset we've got is, or at least in Calderdale, is just the massive numbers of traders we've got, the traders all having their own platforms and using that. So I'm sure it's something we're already doing, but I'm wondering if as part of the Christmas campaign and future campaigns, when we're looking at if there's something we really want to highlight, like the food gathering, I went and it was absolutely packed. Whether it's one of these where actually we get it out to all the traders, get it out to the bids, get it out to a lot of people to share through their own platforms. Because obviously we can do paid advertising, but that just costs a lot and you don't know whether you target the right people. But that kind of organic reach, and it's something I'm bad at, because I'm conscious that, you know, as a councillor who has a market in the ward, I should be sharing more and doing more. And I was just going to quickly ask about video content as well. I know obviously producing video content can cost a lot and it can take a lot of time, but I think it was the Think You Know Halifax campaign. I saw that and that worked really well, but I'm thinking specifically around markets, and it sounds like we are planning on doing it, what would be really, or at least I'd find interesting, is kind of the case study stuff, and also, you know, that stuff of like interviewing traders, finding out what gets them into it, doing it that way. Because, you know, speak to a few traders, but not a lot. And it's actually really interesting often hearing where they've come from and how they've ended up in the market and why they picked that. So just those two really, but yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think as a group, we recognise that our key stakeholders, obviously the traders, and they can help us to get the messages out. So I think as part of our plans, we were considering offering some kind of toolkit whereby, you know, we can create some images that the traders can share on their own socials, maybe introducing, you know, a hashtag. But I think you're right. If we're thinking about Christmas all under one roof, you know, we would want to have the butcher, for example, maybe give tips of how to dress the turkey, or, you know, a florist to say, you know, here's some top tips for creating a Christmas wreath. So we were very much thinking, rather than us as a council going, oh, come and visit the markets, come and visit markets, having that engagement organically, like you know, you're saying, to generate that interest and you know, content really, that I think the public, you know, don't want just sales messages, do they? They want inspiration and ideas. Picking up on the point about video content, we wish we could do more videos. It does take quite a lot of resource, but we have got that in-house. You know, we certainly want to have more case studies. They might just take a little while to roll out, but we have, like I said, we have got plans for the one in Brighouse. It's on the radar, and I think if we, you know, sort of aim to have one maybe every quarter, that would probably be manageable, but keep the content fresh as well with new stories, so we're not just regurgitating the same videos, I guess, and films that people have already seen.
Thank you. So are there any more questions? No, and the other thing I did want to say is I think that the Bear With Us banner that you put in the report, I think it's very striking and very stylish. I did like that, and so thanks to those who designed that. And as again, thanks to everybody in the comms team who are all trying very hard to think of imaginative ways to to get the message out, and that's really good to see. Okay, so if we've no more questions on that, if we can then move on to item 7, the work programme, which we've obviously already touched on in terms of Brickhouse and other market, how we deal with disruption.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I do wonder, so as usual, we've got the work programme for the next couple of meetings for the remainder of the municipal year is attached to the papers. And really the purpose of this item is to seek views on what's proposed to be discussed and whether there are any other additional items that members would wish to consider. And I do wonder, because actually the Todmorden markets are in exactly the same situation as the issue that we discussed earlier. So I just wonder whether we might broaden that item out to talk about almost the kind of the future plan for our markets and managing the transition. And maybe there's a piece around kind of where we are now, where we intend to be across the markets, and what we need to do in the meantime to position ourselves ready for that. And as I say, that probably becomes quite a large conversation, but probably a really important and significant one at this stage.
I think that would be a good idea. Would you be happy with that, Councillor Blackborough? Because it was originally your... Yep, okay. So the comment from Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, just wondering if it'd be worth maybe having something, perhaps January is probably the best time to do it, or if January is becoming quite a busy meeting, maybe April, but just around kind of maybe exploring a bit more the effect of the cost of living on the markets, and not just traders, but the kind of people who use the market. It might be quite interesting to look at that and see how that is affecting it, because it's not just, you know, the markets are primarily a retail space, but if there are people who are going in every day for that social side of things, if they simply can't afford to, that's quite a massive impact on their lives. So I'm wondering if it's worth looking at that in a bit more detail.
So, sorry, Councillor Blackborough, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. I think I'm on the working party for the cost of living, and actually the markets have a real massive impact in relation to getting cheaper food sometimes. So I think it's looking at integrating those. So in my role as a subgroup on that working party, I feed in comments in relation to the markets as well, you know, as to how we probably need to use markets even more so.
Okay, so would members like us to consider that in, yes, probably April, I would think now, because that could be, as Alan says, quite a long conversation about the management of change. Yep, so yes, can that be added in then, please? Thank you. So any more comments or suggestions on the work programme? No, okay, thank you. So